I like to call this working the plan. Now, the official PMP, or project management professional term for this, is called project performance and control. And that's just a really fancy way of saying that everything you learned in the kickoff meeting now needs to be delivered on. So in addition to doing the work, a key component of your matter management is keeping the client apprised of the progress. Keeping the client updated on the progress of a matter will ultimately make the client sort of an involved player on the team, and that makes it more likely that you're going to create a final product and a final result that's going to speak to all of their needs. Also remember, and I sort of said this, your clients are dealing with internal reporting that they have to do as well. They're going back to their organizations, so they have a personal and a professional sort of credibility is on the line here, and clients want to look smart. They don't want to have to constantly change the scope with their managers because you didn't have enough communication with them throughout the life of the matter. Attorneys who are able to deliver results while making their clients look good along the way, those are the attorneys who will find that clients go out of their way to work with them again and again. So it's not just about the legal thing. It's about also, is my client getting what they need so they look good? Because if they look good, they're going to keep coming back to me. And that's what this is all about. How do we keep our clients happy so they come back to us and they spend more money with us? Now, if you've had the client matter kickoff meeting, this next step becomes pretty seamless because you should know your client's communication preferences. What I found, most clients want status updates on a weekly and, of course, on an as-needed basis, unless you're in an extremely time-sensitive situation. And whether the client has told you their preference is an email update or a formal progress report, or maybe they want to have a weekly phone conversation with you, what I found is you're going to save yourself a ton of time each week if you use a template for mapping out your matter update. So this is an example of a project template. I use this with my own clients, quite frankly. And the point is you want clients to be able to quickly get to the information that they need to know. So typically, I just use a list of key bullets. I group them by topic, and I find this is a really effective way to share information with clients. The matter update, your weekly update with a client, this is not the time to showcase your creative writing skills. So each week as you make updates, also one of the things you want to keep in mind is drop all the old information. So anything that's been resolved, questions that have been answered, milestones that have been completed, drop all of those so that this document stays condensed and easy to digest. Also, the update should be focused on reporting the activities and only the activities that are directly achieving your clients and the other stakeholders' objectives. For example, when I'm in the middle of a client feedback project for a law firm, each week I'm not telling my client how many phone calls I've made and how many people how many times we've tried and left a message. But what I do tell them is, how many interviews we've completed, how many are scheduled, because that is a tracker that tells them how the overall project is meeting that timeline. Now, when you look at this, you might have slightly different categories in your update just based on what it is that your client wants to know. But in my experience, these are the areas that you really can't leave out of the update. So we have things like basic progress and accomplishments. And yes, we're going to, stack the deck in our favor. Let's lead off with the positive because everybody likes to give good news first, and it sets the tone for the rest of the update, in fact. You also want to briefly outline the next major milestones that are going to be completed by that next update, and include a completion date if you can. And what you always want to do is that in line with what we talked about in the matter kickoff meeting? And if it's not, we should probably address that in the email. Why are we getting off of track? What are we going to do to rectify that? And I want to be clear, these are what you're working on currently and the immediate next steps. This is not a download of the entire project from start to finish in this weekly update that you send to your clients. Now, I do find it's helpful that, sort of once a month, it depends on how frequently your client is sort of going back to their internal team to provide a progress report. But I do find once a month it is helpful to sort of just do a quick hit status update on everything so that the client understands, the full scope of the project and how it's running along. Inevitably, in a progress report, you do need to address issues. And before we discuss how to talk about issues in this update, let me be just unequivocally clear. If this is a bigger issue, one that substantially impacts the budget or the timeline or the potential outcome of the matter, you must stop working. That's usually the hardest piece for everybody to take to heart and actually do, but you have to stop working, then pick up the phone and call the client. I know our knee-jerk reaction is, I know how to fix this, let me go ahead and fix this, but we talked about it. The client is going to have decisions and input that they want to make before you make that decision without them. So, you know, and say it's obvious, but, you know, I have to say it out loud, you know, don't put these issues in an email or a written document. Clients, they just have an uncanny ability to completely misread everything you send them. So this is a case where you're going to want to talk to the client, help guide their thinking, be ready to discuss any alternatives and potential solutions to the issue that is at hand. Kind of like those rate negotiations that we were talking about before. You know, this is something you have to do this in person or on the phone because there's just way too much nuance, too much room for misinterpretation, and you want to be in control of these conversations. The other time that you need to call the client, or at least set up a call, is if that issue is one where we previously learned this is a decision point that the client wants to have a final say-so on. And that was what we talked about in that matter kickoff meeting under the communication protocols. So, you know, if there's something that you know the client wanted to hear about, you're going to have to, you know, schedule a time to talk with them about it. Okay, so that's my caveat to talking about issues, but back to issues that we can list in the progress report. These are obviously issues of a more minor nature, and they come up all of the time. You know, maybe there was an error in a brief that you sent over that needs to be corrected. These can easily be addressed in your update. There are a few rules of thumb that I would follow. The first is brevity is paramount. Do not harp on the issue. Quickly and directly describe the issue. When you spend too much time talking about the issue itself, it seems to escalate and get bigger and bigger in the client's mind. So we just want to be real brief describing any issues that have come up. The second is you always want to provide a course of correction or at least alternatives for the client to consider. Clients have turned to you to make their lives easier, not to give them more problems to think about. So whenever there's an issue, always start thinking about what the solution can be. The third is if this issue has come about because of an error on the firm's side, you should quickly offer an apology. It's the decent thing to do, but it also shows clients that you're willing to take responsibility for the issue. I don't know how many times I've heard from clients say they made this mistake and they never even apologized for it. You know, we're as humans, I think we're trained to expect the apology. So offer it, you know, and it can be brief. You don't have to get overly gushing or anything like that. And sort of related to that, even if this is not directly your fault, you know, now's not the time to throw anyone under the bus. So whether it is you, someone else on your team, maybe it's opposing counsel's fault, maybe it's even the client's fault that this issue has come about. There is nothing productive that can come out of discussing why the problem happened and whose fault it is. Putting blame, calling someone out, sort of, you know, putting it out there that you're disappointed with someone very specific in an email or a written progress report, it's pretty low on the petty scale, and clients really do not take well to that. It stands out to them. They just want someone who's going to take accountability and offer a solution. They don't particularly care how the problem came about and who's to blame. So what does this look like in a bullet in your report? Pretty brief, you know, something like, we noticed there was an error in the brief we sent over yesterday, apologize for the oversight, we're already making the needed updates, we'll have a new version to you for review by tomorrow close of business. That's it. If the client wants more information, they'll call you and ask you for it. You don't need to beleaguer over this because you want it to look like you've got the situation under control. Okay, finally, the last piece of your progress report is that you should be asking clients very directly about anything that you need answered in order to move forward. Clients are really, really bad at remembering their role in the scope of the project, and they're really, really bad at seeing how their response impacts your timeline for getting things done. And what we have found is that when you try to sort of discreetly or coyly remind clients of the information or the deliverables that they need, even if it's like, oh, just don't want you to forget, I still need that revised brief from you. It never works. So you really want to be quite direct. I need the revised brief back by close of business Wednesday so we can file it before the deadline on Thursday. Directness is appreciated by clients. It's not seen as pushy. They are juggling so much stuff, and they're just glad that someone took the time to remind them of something that they need to get done. So you do want to call it out, and you do want to do it quite directly. Now, throughout the course of the matter, these are going to be the areas your clients are constantly monitoring and assessing you on. So these are the areas that when we have our project manager hat, quite frankly, even our attorney hat on, these are the areas that we should be monitoring and updating the client on to make sure that they are at no point veering into the territory where the client will be dissatisfied with our work. So I've simply provided some litmus test questions here that you can ask yourself throughout the life of the matter. And these will sort of help you understand if maybe a more formal update or maybe with a meeting with the client is needed. And some of these you might have to ask the client also, you know, when it comes to things like quality and client satisfaction. You know, those are things that you might just do a quick check-in with the client, make sure everything is running smoothly. Everything that I have just told you, every last piece of it comes with that massive caveat that I said a little bit earlier. I broke it into 4 tenets of effective legal project management here. It can probably be condensed into one. You are ultimately here to serve the client and deliver what the client wants. Don't get stuck on a project plan. Don't be a super stickler about scope. You obviously need to manage it, but you can't beat up a client over, you know, pennies on the dollar. If you keep the lines of communication open, and if you're honest with the client, you will find yourself in that successful client relationship. So it really is about that transparency and just that back and forth communication that you're having with clients. You see my contact information here. I know a lot of this, you know, you're going to have to digest a lot of what I've told you today. Take a look through the slides for some of those additional details. Feel free to reach out to me.